Good day, ladies and gents. Today we'll be looking at Chapter 4, Module 1 for Risk Management 1.1, Analysis of Hazards. Just to give you a background, from Chapter 1, we started by looking at key definitions of hazards. We looked at what hazards are and what hazards are not. Chapter 2, we looked at the different characteristics of hazards as per our definition. And we have established that all the 11 characteristics are very important for us as safety practitioners to be able to understand, to be able to identify hazards, and actually try and anticipate the safety risk levels that these hazards can pose. Chapter 3, we moved in depth. We looked at the types of hazards that we have, the modes of hazards that we have, also the classes of energies, which are key. We have established that from all these inherent characteristics, the interaction is quite important, as well as the energies of hazards. We actually have gone as far as saying it is the energies of the hazards that actually creates a safety risk. Today we're going to be trying to go further and look how we can analyze those hazards. This is just an example, just a background. All tangible objects, meaning solid, liquid, and gases, they can be sensed either by being seen, touched, smelled, tasted, felt, or heard. Hazards all have some form of basic or potential energy, shape, mass, volume, density, levels. Hazards are also governed by natural laws and therefore they have symmetry. Hazards are always in interaction with one another in the vicinity. Their influence depends on the modes of interactions, meaning whether they are dormant, armed, or active. The types of interactions, namely additive, synergistic, and antagonistics, and the levels of interactions, namely non-interactive, reactive, or interactive. Identifying hazards. In order to analyze a hazard, one needs to know what the hazard is. So you need to identify the hazards correctly. So if you cannot identify those hazards correctly, you will miss the key risk areas within your risk assessment. And the people that you're trying to safeguard in the workplace, they will be exposed to these hazards, which in turn can create safety risks, and then you should be able to control them. You cannot control what you don't know. So the very first step when it comes to our baseline, when it comes to our risk assessment process, is to really know what hazards are. Hence, we've taken so many chapters to try and give you the snapshot of understanding in depth what hazards are, their interactions, their energies, as well as their characteristics. So one needs to know exactly what hazards are in the situation you are entering into, in order to determine whether one is competent to deal with safety risk levels and be safe. Ultimately, once we identify those hazards, we can anticipate safety risk levels, and then we can put the necessary control or remedial measures to prevent those hazards from creating safety risks that can create an accident at the end of the day. So a lack of awareness or knowledge will leave you very vulnerable to potential damage or harm hazards, or the harm that those hazards could cause. Very, very important, ladies and gents. Challenges. There are some real challenges involved in identifying a hazard correctly. How often do we experience that particular hazard? Visibility, or color, or shape, or size, or sound, or position, or smell, or perception, or likes or dislikes, or habits or prejudices. And many more influence our identification of hazards. If I say manganese, and you've never seen what manganese looks like, you will miss it in terms of, you might know that it's a hazard, but you won't know the effect of long-term exposure of that particular element, and so forth. So lack of knowledge of existence of a hazard creates the main reason why one cannot identify that hazard. So you need to understand those hazards. You need to be aware of those hazards within any space, within any process, within any activity, or within every task that one carries in the workplace. Competence is an indispensable prerequisite for identifying hazards correctly. If you have never seen a specific hazard such as manganese, you will not be able to identify it when you come across it. So competence is key in trying to identify hazards correctly. Knowing or being competent in identifying hazard is not enough to be safe as well. It is crucial that you analyze the hazard in order to determine what safety risk it offers. Key knowledge of the characteristics of a hazard. Key is knowledge of the characteristics of that hazard. If not familiar with the characteristics of hazards and the role they play in making that hazard hazardous by creating safety risks, then it's going to be a problem. Then you will not be able to analyze hazards and determine the safety risk levels. Analyzing hazards. When you go into the process of analyzing hazards, you should think about these hazards in this specific manner. Before you can be able to analyze those hazards, you should think about it in these terms. The nature of that hazard. Is this hazard, is it a solid or liquid or in a gaseous form? You need to take into consideration all the energies that are part of that hazard. You need to look at all characteristics that together with the energies can add to a safety risk. You need to look at its functioning, meaning its mode, its interaction, its behavior. Should such hazards be human or other living things? So once you consider all these four things, it will be simple for you to be able to analyze that hazard. The nature, the energies that are part of it, the characteristics together with the energies, its functioning, which has the most interactions and behavior. Then we are in a better position to be able to analyze that hazard. Example, a street cat jumping in a lounge versus a neighbor's cat. If you're in your house, you're sitting down, you're watching TV, a black cat just jumps, you don't know that black cat, what are you going to do? You're most probably going to run or scream. Or if you believe in witchcraft, you might say, hey, it's a sign for witchcraft. It's a black cat, I don't know it, it's dirty, just jumped. So you're going to be concerned. What have you just done? You've just analyzed that hazard. Nay, you've seen a black cat, you've seen it probably as a danger, or it might not be a danger, but what that process of determining whether it's good or bad, it's part of analysis. But if a nice, beautiful white cat fury, you know it's a neighbor's one, it comes in your lounge, most probably you're not going to run away. No, you must take beauty or you call the neighbor to say, hey, the cat is here. So what you have done, you have looked at the nature, you've looked at the energies, you've looked at the modes and the functioning of that hazard, and you've discerned, this is a neighbor's cat, I'm used to this cat, I'm not going to be running away. So that is part of hazard analysis, in simple terms. Identifying energy source plays a vital role in hazard analysis. And that's what I've been saying for most of the chapter. The energies of the hazards are key. Hazard matrix, it's one of the methodologies that one can use to determine the hazardness of that particular hazard or to be able to analyze the safety risk levels. By using a matrix, the hazardness of a hazard can be determined by adding the total of the input of the energy and all the other characteristics creating that particular safety risks. The hazardness pertaining to a specific energy and the additional characteristics are expressed as a factor of 1. By adding the values of separate characteristics of a single total and dividing it by 100, the closer value to the 1, the higher the hazardous factor, and the more hazardous or dangerous such energy is. Example, they've looked at Okay, they were looking at the grinder here. I'm not sure why that picture is not there. Anyway, hazard analysis, ladies and gents, is very important. So your hazard matrix is one of but many techniques that one can use to determine the hazardness, or to be able to analyze those hazards correctly. There are many techniques that we can use. But the most important thing, and what you need to remember as health and safety practitioners, is that when you do hazard analysis, you don't have to do it alone. It's usually done in teams. Hazard analysis forms an integral part of a safety risk assessment. There is an enormous wide range of hazards all over the world, and therefore the best and the most effective way to analyze hazards is doing it within a framework of multidisciplinary or cross-functional or adhocracy task teams. Let's look at each of the teams separately. Multidisciplinary teams will comprise of members who are familiar with a specific hazard based on expert knowledge, functions, and responsibility and experience. That means you're going to get a group of experts who have dealt with a particular type of hazards. They've got their skills and the knowledge and experience, and then they are able to tell you in terms of an example that I made earlier of manganese. We said if you don't know manganese, you won't identify it and you don't know the impacts. But if you're dealing with people that are working in smelters of chrome and manganese and metal alloys, they will tell you manganese, too much exposure to manganese over long periods of time, inhaling manganese fumes, inhaling manganese dust can lead to Parkinson's-like diseases. So they'll give you more information, and they know how it is made, manufactured, from the ore to the furnaces up until it's a final product. So that's a type of team that you're looking for. Members that are team members which are familiar with a specific hazard based on their expert knowledge, functions, and responsibilities, as well as experience. The second team is your adhocracy task team. Are the temporary structures formed to resolve a given problem and then dissolve afterwards? So it's an ad hoc. You're looking at something. Ad hoc is not a permanent team. That means I'm going to get this person from there, this person from there, this person from there. They're going to meet together, analyze, do the hazard analysis, and they're going to disperse. And your last type of team is your cross-functional team, are similar to both adhocracy as well as your multidisciplinary teams or organic model. What is an organic model? An organic model is simply a structure that is flat, that uses cross-functional teams. We talked about cross-functional teams with little or no formal structure, with a comprehensive information network. That means they can get information from anywhere. They've got a comprehensive information network that relies on participative decision-making. That's an organic model. It's a structure that is flat, that uses cross-functional teams with little or no formal structures, with a comprehensive formal information network that relies on participative decision-making. So if you've got a group of experts together sitting in one room with a leader analyzing a specific type of hazards, then they need to make a decision or agree. We said hazard analysis is done in teams. So is the rest of the risk assessment process. We'll get to that in the following chapters. These elements tie with the structure and the functioning of adhocracies. The task team needs to reach consensus on determining the hazardous factor of the hazard in an applicable business. And I think